We're all stressed out. Get over it. Aren't you feeling better yet? You look perfectly fine. You're not really injured. It's all in your head. Those statements cut deep. They're examples of what not to say to someone with invisible injuries. The stigma around invisible injuries is a real and widespread problem. According to the Department of Health and Human Services, nearly 1 in 2 people have an invisible injury. Living with a chronic invisible illness is hard enough. Adding stigma makes the healing process even more difficult. How do you explain this painful reality to your family, friends, employer, doctors, and insurance companies? How do you say it in a way they would understand when you look fine on the outside? The injured lose their sense of personal identity as they are defined or labeled. This embedded denial can lead to isolation, depression, financial strain, and even suicide. I would like to share with you my story and how it changed my life. The day was February 9th, 2010. It was also my son's 16th birthday. I was working as a supervisor in a sawmill. 3 hours into my shift, I had to unjam a giant log that got stuck. The logs we were cutting are called cants. They're 14 inches thick, 21 inches wide, and each piece weighs 1,000 pounds. It was my job to keep production moving. I made a decision to crawl into a tight, confined space to manually free up this cant. It was stuck on edge against a large steel beam. In behind this stuck cant was now a massive wall of wood. As soon as this cant was free, someone turned on the machine, and I was immediately being crushed alive by 12,000 pounds of wood. I could hear my body cracking, gurgling, and crunching. It felt like my head was going to explode. There was so much pressure. I thought to myself, if this doesn't stop, I'm going to get ripped into 2 pieces and die. I then blacked out. My coworkers then performed miraculous feats of strength to rescue me from this machine. By the time I was freed, I was not breathing, and they all thought I was dead. I had now been unconscious for about 12 minutes. Right before they were about to perform CPR, miraculously, I started breathing. The immense pain was overwhelming. I was fighting for every breath. I had to remind myself to breathe in and then breathe out. I was rushed to the hospital. I was in agony, and the ambulance ride was horrific. I could feel every vibration and bump throughout my spine. When I arrived at the hospital, I was told by paramedics and doctors that my organs were failing. I also had an anoxic brain injury, a punctured and collapsed lung, multiple broken bones, and severe soft tissue damage. There was a lot of confusion and panic. I was frightened. I didn't understand what was happening. I felt weak, and something had to change because I really thought I was going to die. But then I was touched by an angel. It was my wife. She is my best friend and biggest support. We're deeply in love. She makes me want to be better. I was unrecognizable to Jen at first because I had been bleeding out of my eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. I also had severe and deep bruising. My injuries were critical, but I now had hope because I wasn't alone. My accident has left me with numerous invisible injuries. I have a permanent brain injury and cognitive disorder. Just imagine having a concussion that never goes away. I have severe spine, lung, shoulder, and nerve damage. I also get between 70 to 90 painful injections in my head, spine, and shoulder every 4 months to help me. Now, going through all this revealed to me who my true friends are. Growing up, I knew a caring family, the Dunkleys. Their house was my home away from home. Their son Ron was like a brother to me and my best friend. After my accident, Ron would drive all the way to Abbotsford and then take me into Vancouver for some sporting events. After one of those trips, I apologized because I thought I wasn't as much fun anymore. Ron told me, "Henczel, don't be ridiculous. It was one of the funnest nights I've ever had. I'll always be here for you, brah." That meant the world to me, knowing I could always count on him. Unfortunately, a few months later, that would all change. Ron was a fireman and avid football fan. He traveled to almost every pro sports stadium in North America. He was in Seattle when he got into the most horrific accident. He was hit and dragged by a train, ripping his lower body to shreds. He went through over 40 surgeries before infection finally took over his body. I saw him take his last breath. Now, on top of everything else I was dealing with, I had to deal with the death of my best friend, just 11 months after my accident. Ron had over 1,700 people at his funeral. He lived life to the fullest, and he would have wanted me to do the same. Vince Lombardi said the greatest accomplishment is not in never falling, but in rising again after you fall. I am here today because I got back up. In addition to all my other injuries, I also suffer from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, one of the most frustrating conditions I have to deal with. One of the symptoms of PTSD is exaggerated startle reflex. So let me explain. One day, I'm having a really difficult time. My mind and body were on edge. So I went to pick up my favorite smoothie to cheer me up, the Mighty Kale. The last thing I wanted to do was see or talk to anybody, so I sat at the table at the far corner with my back turned to the door. Little did I know, a group of people had quietly opened the door and were now standing right behind me. What happened next? Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, 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 ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. Yes, that actually happened. A loud mariachi band in Abbotsford. Now, most people would be startled by that, but I was having a full-on panic attack. I couldn't breathe, I was covered in sweat, and I was shaking. That feeling lasted for hours. So that is how I explain to people what having PTSD is like. A mariachi band hiding around every corner. Now, my invisible injuries have given me my biggest challenges. I had to fight every day through my tragedies to not slide into a deep depression. I had to rely on my support to not isolate myself further. I lost my identity, my sense of control, and any meaningful activity. This made me feel like less of a person. I fought through the darkest days of my life, not to mention the financial strain this put on my family. You add stigma on top of that, and I felt like giving up. This made it hard to get the help I needed, prolonging my already difficult recovery. We need to tear down the barriers of stigma that block access to services and recovery. There does not need to be insult added to injury. I would like to share what can help silence this stigma. One of the most powerful strategies I used was telling my story. Now, sharing my story was difficult at first, but it gave me a voice, and this was emotionally healing for me. My story helped restore my identity and self-worth because of the effect it had on others. It created understanding and compassion instead of denial. In 2006, a study was published in the journal Neuroimage. Researchers in Spain determined that when it comes to inspiring people to understand a new change in themselves, storytelling is the only thing that works. Storytelling is one of the most powerful ways we have to communicate and motivate. Stories make the invisible visible. Here are 3 things we can all do. First, Living with invisible injuries can be very isolating personally and socially. So if you have an invisible injury, I encourage you to reach out to others. Find support and share your story. You're not alone. The stories of struggles and challenges are the best stories. Be honest about your obstacles and how you overcame adversity. You can inspire and help people to help others reach their full potential. People will tell themselves, if they can do it, so can I. Second, if you know or encounter someone with an invisible injury, listen to what they are going through. You can always learn more. Encourage those with invisible injuries to tell their own story. I would not be where I am today if I didn't have people believing in me. Encouragement fosters confidence. You can make a positive difference in someone's life. Reach out and give the injured their voice back. Finally, as a society, there is an increased need for creating awareness and changing attitudes around invisible injuries. Often these changes simply start with conversations that help educate and encourage understanding. Public information and community participation can benefit everyone. Spreading awareness will build bridges, not walls. And improved medical and social validation can create a more accepting and understanding world. Stories can be silenced. Stigma can be silenced through stories that celebrate what we can do, not what we can't do. Those statements that were told to me reminded me of everything I can't do. Do you remember the wood I was crushed by are called can'ts? The stigma I felt was also crushing. Let me explain. I would tell myself, I can't just feel better. I can't just get over this. I can't get the help I need. I was crushed by can'ts, literally and figuratively. But now I'm crushing my can'ts. You can crush your can'ts too.